Sure. So the way I look at the ego is as this computer that controls our subconscious, or it's always comparing with our past. How do we react to the present condition? And some of my friends tell me, no, we have to kill the ego. We have to overcome the ego to transcend. I would really like to know what you think about that.
Ooh, that's a very good question. Thanks for asking. So the ego, in my eyes, is the vehicle for higher powers and a vehicle for the soul to be expressed. And the ego, we need the ego. It is the sense of I in this world. Without the ego, there'd be no individuality. There'd be no sense of this is me and that is you. There'd be no sense of memory. There'd be no sense of ever existing without the ego. And there's this kind of like warped new age narrative around, I want to kill my ego, I want to dissolve my ego and all these things. And that's actually bad. It is a psychological operation in a sense that the mission here is to evolve and expand our ego to the point where it can encompass and express the self or the soul. Because the ego is how we communicate. Like right now, we are both speaking and thinking from our ego. Our ego is like what is our conscious awareness of self. Right? And to dissolve or release or kill the ego would be basically to dissolve back into oblivion, to like be recycled back into source when you lose your ego. And I look at perfected ones or perfected initiates like Zoroaster, like the Christ, Buddha, Quetzalcoatl, these types of people as individuals that expanded their ego to be a vehicle for the soul and then refined it. They integrated it into a perfect vehicle for the self to be expressed, for the higher powers to come through. And the ego itself is conscious awareness, and the ego holds our past, what we think of, what we identify with, what we think this self is. The ego judges, it says this is good, this is bad, and whatnot.
Right.
A lot of these philosophies out there, like Taoism, for instance, is about dissolving duality, about dissolving good and evil. And what this does actually is allow the truer self to come through. So the ego creates a shadow, in a sense. It is like, this is like my conscious awareness of operations going on. This is who I think I am and all these things. But everything that you truly are that aren't included in that, like for instance, your ego might be programmed to lust after this type of image of a woman or a man, right? But the self truly loves like this kind of image, right? And this like conflict right here is because the ego has made these judgments. This is like good, this is bad, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, this is familiar, this is unfamiliar, this is comfortable, this is uncomfortable.
Right.
And by dissolving that, by becoming more of a passerby, in the words of Christ, by like, I guess, more dispassionate observation and being more centered in the self, right? The ego, or like the monkey mind of the ego, the monkey mind operator, kind of like releases the controls and lets the higher self, or like the soul, the truer self, speak through. And how I see our mission here is in fact building up the ego, because we need ego. We need just enough ego to stay up on this plane, in the sense is like, you need ego to, if I want to make a video, right? If I don't feel like I'm very worthy, if I don't identify as a creator, as a force, as a co-creator with everyone out here, if I don't identify as like someone who is worthy and has power and has something to share with others, that is all of the ego. But if my ego is weak and just like, oh, I'm worthless, oh, I want to be nothing, oh, I want to eliminate all desires in life, you're never going to actualize your potential. You're never going to bring forth yourself. So I see this evolution of the ego and the soul, in a sense, is like this dance. And for every increase in ego or power, really, like personal power, like individuation, for every increase in ego, there must be an increase in humility, right? So I've seen in my path that as, wow, I can do this. I'm really strong. Wow, I can share really well, right? Then all of a sudden I'm humbled just as hard. Like I'll just be embarrassed, or I'll lose it all, or something like that. And it's to show me that, yes, I can build my ego, but I must refine it and stay humble in my heart so that my soul can actually be speaking through. And we see a lot of instances out here where people have built up power in their ego, like maybe they're very intelligent in a way, but then they've never like been humbled or actually like release this identity they've like formed around intelligence to let that intelligence be a vehicle for something. So we must build our ego, we must build our experiences, we must build personal power and a greater sense of I am,
Okay.
right? But then match that with an increase of humility, an increase of virtue, so that the ego doesn't become a blockade to the self, but a vehicle for the self. And here's also the kind of the thing. Since the ego is our conscious awareness, it is about essentially like control. It's the known world. It's what you know, what you have experienced, right?
Right.
This is why humility is so important. Because the place of the soul is the other. It's the mystery. Like the soul and spirit is such a mystery. Like the spirit living in all things and your synchronistic path through this life is such a mystery, right? And I see a lot of really tight, restrictive egos out here right now because there's lack of honoring of the mystery. There's lack of humility in knowing our place. There's a lack of honoring the fact that, wow, we're all human. All these authorities are just, little children masquerading around with masks on. We're all right here on Earth. We're all going the same direction. Like, let's honor the mystery. Let's honor the fact that we don't know the potential of seeing and feeling the connection to Great Spirit in every aspect of life. We don't know the potential of who we are. We don't know, our true voice. The ego is something that's picked up and been programmed by society, by family, by, all these different forms of media and taken, and then we form this identity on it. And a huge part of integrating the ego as to become a vehicle for the self is like almost a shattering, almost a death to that one form. In Soulcraft, it's called your second adulthood. When you start your second adulthood, in the hero's journey, this would be like your call to adventure, your call into the unknown. So I kind of see like our development in this world as like from the ages of, 0 to about 16, 17, right in there, our ego's being developed. Our sense of I am this. We're being programmed by everything we're picking up and whatnot. And then it comes time for the self to shake off that skin and grow a new skin, in a sense. And this is your call to adventure. This is where I left home and kind of like was like abandoned everything I knew and started studying the mystery schools and the esoteric knowledge and redefining myself around people that have no concept of me. And that allowed me to embody a greater version of myself, something that rings more true. And I have a feeling that that's going to happen time and time again as I kind of grow into this new skin, and then I'm going to have to shed this skin. I'm going to have to transmute a layer of my ego to allow it to expand, to encompass more of the self, and then refine it, refine the ego so that the ego isn't saying things for the ego, but the ego is speaking with the soul.
That's the key. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I guess a meta, like just to see that in an analogy is me making videos. When I go back and I watch my first, my original, first few videos, I see my ego speaking the majority of the time. It's so triggering to me because I'm like, oh my God, it's so funny. It's so funny. Because I thought at the time that I was expressing like all this info and whatnot, but I really see that I love to hear myself talk. But having this practice of making videos and then listening to and watching these videos, I see how my ego is coming out and speaking for itself instead of trying to transmit a message. And, I've slowly refined this to the point where now I make videos and I feel very good that I'm just speaking directly what I'm intending to say. I'm letting it flow through me. My ego is not getting in the way. It's actually being a vehicle. And this is learning how to get out of our own way, learning to let the ego serve for what it's here to serve. You see, we need to learn how to speak. We need to learn the social norms and whatnot so we know how to communicate effectively to people, and that's of the ego. But that's not the end game. We need to build the ego and then refine it so that the soul, the truth, the higher being can speak through the ego. And getting into the final note on the ego in this view is a lot of this warped New Age doctrine in the sense of Buddhism, for instance, is all about relief from suffering. It's all about desire.
Oh, that's a big one. Thank you for bringing that up.
And it's all about releasing desire, apparently, but it's such utter bullshit. So much has been mistranslated. lost over thousands of years. And it's not about releasing desire. It's about kindling the spark of desire and lifting your gaze to seeing what you truly want. What's your true will, right? What does your soul want? What are you here to do? What are you here to bring forth from within you? If you look at any sacred text, any of the words, like even in Buddhism itself, like, you think Buddha didn't want anything? Obviously, he
Right.
really wanted to actualize himself. That's why he fasted for millions of days. Like, just like went through every single spiritual thought, every guru, like seen all the world, and he saw there was only one thing he actually wanted, and that was to become a perfected initiate in a sense, right? And so he went at that with all he had. That was his true will. In the Zohar, this ancient Judaic mystical text, in the Zohar, it talks about aligning your desire with the desire of the Most High for you is your mission, is leveling up. And as you level up, like through the tree of life, essentially your view and the Most High's view become one. So therefore, God can work in you and you can live in God. And that's because your true will, like what you want in this life, is exactly what God wants for you. And like God wants what is best for you. So if we can get real with ourselves, if we can sit in the self and be like, this is actually what's best for me, this is what I'm here to do, this is how I'm here to serve, right? And then go towards that desire. That is the path of actualizing yourself. That is the path of fulfilling God's work on earth. And that is the path of like basically building and then refining and integrating the ego. Because in order to do something very great, right, you're gonna have to go through a lot of obstacles. You're gonna have to grow and develop this character that is rooted on an iron, true foundation. And really, that's how I see the path. All these people that are subscribed to this like New Age Buddhist, philosophy and whatnot, this lack of desire, this letting go of everything, like that doesn't result in any growth. That doesn't result in doing God's work here on earth. That doesn't result in helping and serving others. That doesn't result in you becoming who you are. That doesn't result in bringing forth what is within you. And he who is within you is far greater than he who you see out here, or she. And that's the words of Jesus. And like, it's like, obviously, we're not here to drift back into oblivion. We're obviously here to perfect the I am, to become the true I am, to let the I am be the vehicle for what the mystery flows through. And that is immortality, in a sense. That is the immortal I. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautifully put.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wow. And I get a recording, right?
Yeah, that was recorded.
Oh, I can hear it again.
Wow.
Oh, wow. I have so many thoughts I wish I could share. I mentioned to you that I come from Templars, and in some